Hello again and welcome back. If you are familiar with my channel, you are going to recognize this car immediately. If not, this is my 1931 Ford Model A Coupe. Now this car has a number of upgrades. It is powered by a brand new Bert's block, a Bert's cam, a Snyder 6-to-1 head on there. As you can see, we have the Burns downdraft intake with a Ford 94 carburetor. In addition to that, it's got a lightened flywheel, a V8 transmission, so we'll have synchronized second and third gears, in addition to a Mitchell overdrive. So this car is just a beautiful touring car, and that is what I use it for. So as you can see, it is quite dirty because I have just not kept it clean. I have just been putting miles down on her, but just listen. Has that very distinctive Model A sound still, despite everything we have done to her. So today we're just going to go take her out, put some miles on her. Fall is fast approaching here in Michigan, so this is just part of my fall driving series here. I hope you enjoy. All right, let's hit the road. Roll up the window to reduce the road noise because it's pretty bad in this car. You would believe it or not, we are now doing 50 miles per hour here according to the speedometer, which is mounted really awkwardly, really down low here, so it's a bit hard to see at times. And there's the beauty of the overdrive. You shift it in the overdrive, things quiet down, and now I'm close to about 55 here, and you really can hardly tell. It makes a tremendous difference. I do have blinkers installed in this car for primarily my own safety here, just so other people don't run into me. People just do not pay attention enough as it is, so I always recommend blinkers on a Model A. I also recommend the ability to speak English properly. Model A's, they just love to be cruised through town. They love these low speeds here. Things are really quiet in them. They're not obnoxious with the vibrations, with the noise. Just a lot of fun. Now at the higher speeds, that does change quite a bit. You get a lot of road noise, you get a lot of shaking, and then with these tiny, skinny little tires as they are, no matter how good your brakes are, even if you have switched over to juice, as they call them, hydraulic brakes, those skinny, just kind of original style tires, they just do not do a good enough job of providing enough grip, and they just skid. So some things you have to keep in mind when you're trying to go faster in these things. Now I am still on bias plies in this, still mechanical brakes, very original style car outside of the engine performance. I do try to be cautious, make sure I've got plenty of space between me and other people. This car with this Bert's block just drives beautifully. There's plenty of grunt power to get me where I need to go. It helps keep up with traffic even at these lower speeds like this, going up hills, going down hills. Handles them all extremely well. 25 miles per hour, and things are just so quiet and peaceful in here. Just a blast to drive. Everybody loves the Model A's. You usually get people waving at you and sometimes screaming at you. They do tend to get some attention. You just generally don't see cars this old on the streets anymore. Of this V8 transmission, as you can tell, is that I don't have to double clutch. I can just shift directly between like second and third here, not really having to think about it. Now, the original Model A transmission is not synchronized. You have to try to match speeds a little bit or float the gears, otherwise you get the dreaded grinding. However, I do not have a synchronized first gear, so I usually wait till I'm at a complete stop before I ever put the car back in first. You can float it in there if you're good. Unfortunately, I don't drive it consistently enough to be able to do that, so I generally always wait until I'm at a complete stop before I put her back in first gear. However, the Mitchell here lets me cheat a little bit. I can put the Mitchell in neutral, which allows me then to shift the actual transmission in the first gear while I'm still rolling, so it's kind of handy way to cheat, but I don't need to do that very often. Sometimes I'll do that if I'm coming up at like a stoplight and I think it's going to change before I'm completely stopped. That way I might want to be in first gear to be able to take off again. But usually don't have to drive it that way. The little town is quite busy out here today. Getting ahead of myself. I was just talking about how I try not to shift in the first gear until I come to a complete stop. Didn't even think about it and tried to do it there. So yeah, it gets to be tricky sometimes when you go from vehicle to vehicle, trying to remember the nuances of all of them. So surprisingly enough, the Model A is just a fantastic car for this kind of in-town driving. I mean, you can't really go all that fast, so it's right in the wheelhouse of its type of speed. But we'll just try to drive around in town a little bit, enjoy some of the more relaxing aspects of Model A driving, and maybe we'll try to find a little bit more of a high-speed road here. Does look like I might need to get some gas here soon, so I am not running a fuel pump with this downdraft setup, which means I need to pay close attention to my fuel level because I rely on head pressure and the weight of that fuel to keep my carburetor filled up. It is gravity feeding. Now, if I am not careful with that, I can run the fuel level so low that it doesn't quite have enough weight to it to help push it through the lines. And I starve my carburetor for fuel when I go up certain hills, so usually I don't like to let it get below like an eighth of a tank. We're getting close to there, so we're going to head to the gas station, put some gas in here, and then we'll continue our drive. So we are ready to hit the road once more. If you have never started a Model A, there are a number of things that you have to keep track of on your own. So they're a little bit different than the modern car. Generally, you'll have your timing advancement lever over here on your left. Now, you will have to adjust this as you're driving unless you have an upgraded distributor that does this automatically for you. I'm still running an original style, so I have to manage the timing all on my own. So generally you want this lever to be all the way in the up position. And then once it starts, you'll generally slide it down to about 1/3 there when you're just sitting around idling. Once you're actually going and driving, you can move it down to about 2/3 range here. And the entire swing of this arm gives you around 40 degrees of actual timing adjustment there. So all the way at the top will take all of that adjustment out. It'll generally put you around top dead center. That makes it the easiest for the motor to actually fire up because it's not fighting against itself, trying to push back on itself. So that's why you always want it up when you first crank. Over here on the other side, this is our hand throttle. Think of it like a mechanical cruise control. So you can pull this thing down here and it'll adjust how the car's idling. So if you want it to warm up, you can pull this down a little bit and it'll just hold the RPM high while you're letting it warm up. So usually I have that all the way up since we're already warmed up. This will be all the way up when we're starting. Turn the key to on. There's a mechanical fuel cutoff switch underneath the gas tank there. I have that enabled, so that is turned on already. Now if you had an original style engine, you may need to choke it, and your choke would be over here. Additionally, this would be a gas adjusting valve on the Model A's where you can actually fine tune the air-fuel ratio. But because I'm running the Holley 94 on this, all I have over here is just a choke cable, which I rarely have to use, and there's no gas adjustment valve there, so we don't have to worry about any of that. So we should be good here to just hit the starter button. It is not a switch here, it's an actual button down by my foot. Just give that a hit here and we should fire right up. There we go. Pull that timing lever down just a little bit, and we are ready to hit the road once more. Why I went with that downdraft setup and that Holley configuration on here is that the first block, it flows about the same as an original. There's just minor improvements that Terry made. You still generally have the same kind of power as an original block. You can rev it up just a little bit more, and the flow is slightly more increased. Plus, with that touring cam in here, I found that on hills and stuff like that, even with the Marvel carburetor, I was just kind of struggling to get up hills. And with the higher speeds that I tend to run, especially with the overdrive kicked in here, they just put in now, that the car would kind of struggle. So running with this downdraft setup, it's giving me just an extra wiggle room that I needed just to get a little bit more power to be able to maintain a more steady speed up hills. So the car here does just a beautiful job. Most of the time I just kind of tour around at 50 miles per hour. Every so often I'll go a little bit faster just to get out of the way of traffic, but the car runs absolutely beautifully here at 50. It's extremely quiet. This Mitchell overdrive, even with the Hertz block and everything else, is absolutely worth the money just for how much more relaxing it makes it. Because if we take it out of overdrive here, see how much louder it gets. I mean, this Hertz block will do this speed all day long. It'll hold this RPM, no problem. It's not really harming anything. But it's just loud. I mean, I have a little bit of an exhaust leak there. My flange for the muffler was never quite that good where it meets the manifold. I do need to pick up a new one, but even still, it's a lot of RPM. With the overdrive, just quiets it down so much that it's absolutely worth it. I love about Model A's the most is just their rich history. So, I mean, Henry kind of took the world by storm with his production line, and how easily he was able to produce these things and make them affordable. So they became the everyman's kind of car. They sold like hotcakes everywhere. But I mean, it wasn't that long until they were replaced with more safer vehicles, faster vehicles, that sort of thing. But that wasn't the end of the story for these Model A's. I mean, they stuck around for decades. People use these things as farm equipment, as sawmills. I mean, these engines and these frames were used for just about everything. So their story, it just lasts for generations. If you take one out to a car show, or even if you're just out driving around, you'll have people of all ages coming up to you and telling you stories about, oh yeah, that's the first vehicle I learned to drive on. Or my grandpa used one of those as a sawmill after the war. Things like that, or their tractors. And then for a lot of folk that came back after the war, these were what they used to make the hot rods. So the stories around these things, they just never end, and they're so diverse. That is one of the things I love the most about cars, is just hearing the stories about them, how they've been passed down, how they impacted people's lives. That's just something I'm really into. You may have seen that already on the channel. I mean, I've got the Chevelle, and the entire reason I was looking for a Chevelle is because I had a motor that my father left behind that needed a home. I've got a 57 Chevy that I made my father buy me when I was 14 that will get to one of these days. So, very, very much into the story side of vehicles and just learning all of those. It's one of my favorite parts about them. Another great thing about Model A's is that they are relatively affordable. And if you think about classic cars and their markets, they're generally just absurdly expensive. There is a big price tag to get into like a good quality running and driving classic vehicle that looks okay that you don't have to do a bunch of work on. Model A's, on the other hand, kind of the opposite. They are relatively affordable, especially the more kind of original-ish you get. You can find really good drivers that look nice, have good paint, right around that $13,000, $14,000 mark. You can find deals sometimes, get them a lot better than that for a lot less. Sometimes they'll be a lot more if they've got a lot of hop-ups and upgrades, but if you compare that to a lot of the other classic car markets, I mean, you can barely find like rollers for some vehicles for that price. It's very affordable. A lot of people are afraid of them, obviously, because they think they're just going to be too slow to drive around. They're going to be a safety hazard, and it is something you have to keep in mind. I mean, they're not very safe cars. Their construction does not hold up well in accidents. So you do have to pay attention. You got to keep tabs of where other cars are on the road. You have to make sure that you have enough braking distance to be able to stop safely. But you can control, a lot of those variables yourself. So if you drive cautiously, they're not too bad. And they're just a lot of fun to be in. There's usually clubs out there. There's a number of different groups and like regional branches of those clubs that you can become a member of. They run events locally all the time. A lot of great people you can meet that way. I know there's Model A Restorers Club, Mark, there's AFCA, Model A Ford Club of America, I think it is. There's a number of different groups. And I'm a member of all of them, but unfortunately I've got so many different cars, it's hard for me to really get involved with too much of the Model A stuff that goes on. I do try to stay involved with my local market club. And of course, each year I do run out and hit Model A days there at the Gilmore Car Museum. Alright, so this is one of my more favorite scenic little roads here just around town. So as always, I'm just going to shut up and let the car do the talking here for a bit. various speeds really well. So we were doing about 60 there at the fastest. So if you need to keep up with traffic on some of these little back roads, it handles it no problem whatsoever. This Burt's block has just been an amazing addition through here. The Mitchell overdrive, this is just a perfect combination. Never mind my ability to shift it. So that's going to do it here for the Model A. Thank you all so much for watching. Again, enjoy all of the comments, and I will catch you on the next one.